All right, kiddos. We're going to continue on here. We mentioned yesterday, and I'll just kind of go through this. It's very important that you have this out in front of you today. So get it out. I even have mine in front of me. So just next to your notes so that we can kind of see what we're talking about here. It'll be much easier for you. Among the three-ring binder clickings, I will tell you that after the Japanese surrender, again ending World War II, the country of Korea was divided. North Korea was agreed would be ruled by a communist leader. South Korea was agreed would be ruled by a non-communist leader. You're going to hear this scenario again when we get to Vietnam. Okay? The only problem was the North Korean military was very heavily armed and the South Korean military was very unprepared. And as happens, you know, in life, North Korea decides that they will make a move on South Korea and make the entire country communist. So on June 25th, 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. This was very unpopular among the United States. President Truman did not want to see Korea be completely communist. Yes, Nick?
I heard that this war is still happening right now. It's just a ceasefire.
Oh, we'll talk about that. You're a good man. So Truman was determined that South Korea would not fall to communist aggression. So instead of taking this on just as a United States project, he expressed his concern to the United Nations. And the Soviet Union, who was in support of this communist aggression, was boycotting the United Nations at the time and had a poor relationship with other countries. And so Truman received all the support he needed from the United Nations to try to put an end to this communist aggression. Now again, because President Truman received strong support from the United Nations, the war in Korea was fought under UN command. Now there will be American commanders that will be commanding troops there and their own troops, but it's a UN command. And so that meant that many, many countries would be contributing to the supplies and troops for the war effort, but of course the United States is the big brother, and they will be supplying most of the direction. Now, we mentioned yesterday, it's important that you understand this, that the conflict in Korea really couldn't be referred to as a war because only Congress would have the authority to declare war on another country, and they did not do that. So, since the conflict was not considered officially as a war, the Korean conflict was actually referred to as a police action. Okay, now that'll take us to our first subtopic today, which is General Douglas MacArthur's brilliant strategy in Korea. And that's why you're going to need to have this map in front of you, because you're going to need to see what we're talking about, the areas that we'll be talking about within progress, gain, and loss of ground. Now, prior to the United Nations getting involved in the conflict in Korea, the South Korean army was in bad shape. And it's going to be up to the United Nations to rescue them from this problem, because they are very ill prepared and they're not doing very well. Now, to give you an idea how poor they're doing, if you look on your map and note that by September of 1950, South Korean forces had been pushed back to the area of Pusan. You can see that on your map in the southeastern corner of Korea. So they had been pushed all the way back to this area within this dotted line right here. That's where the South Koreans were pushed back to. So you can see that North Korea has pushed them almost completely out of South Korea. So by the time we get involved, you have this little area right here, and that's all they control. And that was in September of 1950. So the United Nations gets involved, and General Douglas MacArthur is going to lead American combat troops in this conflict. And he responds to this situation in which the South Koreans are pushed so far back into the corner. He responds with an incredibly brilliant plan that really takes the North Koreans off guard. Now, what he did is, rather than fight out of this corner and try to, gain the land this way, what he did is he planned a military end run in Korea. Okay, an end run. Now, those of you that know anything about football or play football, if you're on offense and you do an end run, are you running up the middle? You're running around the outside, hoping to maybe surprise the defense to get outside. And if you can get the corner, you can attack from the outside in. Well, that's what he did. If you look on your map, in mid-September of 1950, General MacArthur and his American military forces staged an amphibious attack at Incheon. Now, where's Incheon on this map? you can see what he's done is he's made this end run around and he's attacking behind enemy lines at Incheon. So instead of, look at the map up here, instead of fighting this way, and trying to fight his way out of the corner, he does an end run and attacks at Incheon, right here, behind enemy lines in mid-September of 1950. Brilliant strategy, because the North Koreans are expecting him to fight out of the corner. And instead he takes the end run and he goes around and he attacks at Incheon. Well, this was such a surprise for the North Korean army, it weakened it tremendously. And by October 1st of 1950, just a month after Korea had been pushed clear back to the area of Busan, the North Korean Communist Army was driven back north of the 38th parallel. Now, what's the 38th parallel? Can you see it? What is it? It's a latitude line. Can you see it on the map? Yeah, right here. Yeah, you can see the 38th parallel. And so in less than a month, because of the brilliant strategy in the end run amphibious attack at Incheon, by October 1st of 1950, the Korean Communist Army, North Korean Army, was driven back north of the 38th parallel, which is an imaginary line on the globe that divides the two Koreas, pretty much. There's a little bit of a different division there, but you can see it. So, if you think about it, it only took MacArthur like 2 weeks to accomplish his entire goal of pushing communism out of South Korea. Perfect. Well, that takes us to our next subtopic, which is China enters the Korean War. Okay, and you can see where China is on the map, right? It is northwest of North Korea. So China enters the Korean War.
It's easier to call it a war than a
Yeah, that's why. That's what it's known just as war. So China enters the Korean War. Now, you can imagine that President Truman is just ecstatic about MacArthur's job that he did in the war. I mean, they're both incredibly pleased with the successes. In a period of a month, United Nations forces had pushed North Korean forces out of South Korea. That was our goal. We had just kicked butt and ticked names, and really, within about 2 or 3 weeks, MacArthur did it, right? So we're just thinking this is awesome. Well, MacArthur gets a little greedy. And with all this success that happened so quickly, he wants to push things further by driving communism out of all of Korea. So he wants to go on the offensive into North Korea and drive communism out of all of Korea. So he meets with President Truman, and what do you think Truman's opinions or decision is on MacArthur's plan to drive him out? He thinks it's great. I mean, heck yeah. If we can have one less communist country, let's do it. So MacArthur meets with Truman, and soon after their meeting, the president gave General MacArthur his blessing to continue his strategy. Well, nothing stays a secret, and once General MacArthur planned that strategy, news of his plans to free North Korea of communism reached the Chinese government. They found out that not only are the UN forces going to liberate South Korea, they're going to make a move upon North Korea. And they weren't necessarily against that. Okay, they weren't necessarily against it. So once MacArthur planned his strategy to free North Korea of communism, the news of that plan got to the Chinese government. To be honest with you, they weren't really going to interfere, except the Chinese government made it very clear to the United Nations that American troops or UN troops were to stay clear of the Yalu River. Did not want them near the Yalu River. Can you find the Yalu River on your map? What the Yalu River is basically the border between what? North Korea and China. So the Chinese government doesn't say, hey, don't go into North Korea and try to free them from communism. Just do not get close of the Yalu River. Don't get close to our border. Okay? Because if you do, we are going to respond. Okay? So the Chinese government made it really clear that if UN forces threatened the China-North Korean border, their military would respond. Now, MacArthur knew that. Truman was a little concerned, and despite this clear warning by the Chinese, General MacArthur assured President Truman that China would not interfere. They're not going to interfere. They're just saying that they won't do it. And he boldly promised the president at that time, quote, to have the boys home by Christmas. Okay, so what time of the year was this? Around the first part of October, mid-October, okay? And he's promising the president, don't worry about China. They're not going to interfere in what we do. And I'll, quote, have the boys home by Christmas. So he feels that he can liberate North Korea from communism and have all troops home to be celebrating Christmas with their families. So Truman agreed, and General MacArthur continued his push through North Korea towards the Chinese border. And he's making ground and making ground and making ground. Well, by November of 1950, MacArthur's plan to free all of Korea from communism is like this close to completion. He's just really done well. He's marched through North Korea, just taken, land after land after land. And where is he close to, though, by November of 1950? The Yalu River, okay? Well, he just can't help himself. He's got a bit of an ego, and he still doesn't believe that China will respond. And disaster strikes for the United Nations when troops made contact with the Yalu River. And they violated that border between China and North Korea. So MacArthur really didn't think that they would attack, and he got to the Yalu River thinking they wouldn't respond. Well, unfortunately for the United Nations, they did. They sent approximately 200,000 Chinese soldiers on an assault of UN troops at the border. So they did respond. And they sent about 200,000 soldiers to attack UN troops at the border, causing tremendous casualty for the UN command. Okay? Matter of fact, they caused so much damage that General MacArthur's forces were forced to retreat all the way back on the other side of the 38th parallel. So we had this thing just about in the sack, and we got up to the Yalu River, and 200,000 Chinese soldiers attacked UN troops at the border, causing tremendous casualty. And because of the assault on the part of the Chinese, General MacArthur's forces were forced to retreat all the way back to the 38th parallel. Now you can see the South Korean capital there. What's the capital of South Korea? Seoul. In addition to the disastrous news that they had pushed UN forces past the 38th parallel, in January of 1951, North Korean forces recaptured Seoul. So not only did we lose ground back south of the 38th parallel, now the North Koreans have control of the South Korean capital. Now you think about what this did. In 3 weeks, we had accomplished our goal. We get greedy. We are really kicking butt in North Korea. We violate that border, and we are in worse shape than we were when MacArthur drove them out after the amphibious landing in Incheon. We were worse shape than that, and we had this thing done. Well, MacArthur is not a quitter. He now calls for more serious action against the North Koreans, and that'll lead us to our next subtopic, which is the Truman-MacArthur controversy. Okay, the Truman-MacArthur controversy. Again, MacArthur's a military general. He's not used to losing. So the recent failures by his UN command gave him an entirely new philosophy concerning running communism out of Korea. What he wanted to do is he wanted to commit massive American forces and win a decisive victory in all of Korea. He was done screwing around with the UN command. He wanted to bring in the Americans, the big boys, and he wanted to kick butt and take names, and we're going to get the job done. So he wants to commit massive American forces, and he wants to win a decisive victory in all of Korea. He's done messing around with the United Nations. He's going to get the boys from America in there and take care of business. Now, he believed that a total victory over North Korea was essential. He stated publicly, there is no substitute for victory. So he made it real clear that he wanted to commit massive American troops to win a decisive victory in Korea, and he believed that a total victory over Korea was essential and stated publicly, quote, "There is no substitute for victory." Now, he also had this philosophy: if committing massive troops to the effort doesn't quite get it done, I'm not above using the atomic bomb in Korea either. He made that real clear. So in addition to committing massive troops to the effort, MacArthur also believed in the use of the atomic bomb, if necessary, to achieve total victory over North Korea. This is where he and Truman parted company. Because what did Truman think would happen if we used the atomic bomb again this close after World War II? We would end up with a World War III. And so Truman and MacArthur butted heads over this part. And he strongly disagreed with MacArthur's philosophy. He said he would not commit the use of atomic weapons because he thought that doing so could certainly result in a World War III. Well, how did MacArthur take that news? Not well. So what do you think he did? He just said, "Okay, Mr. President, that's fine. You're right, I'm wrong." What do you think he did? What did he do?
Trash.
What's that? Say it. He did. He trash talked Truman. Where? Where? Well, not so much TV. Well, probably some TV. He went back to the United States and campaigned for his cause. Trashing Truman, being critical of the president, really overstepping his bounds. And he stated publicly to the media back in the United States that he should have the authority to use the atomic bomb in North Korea, and if the damn Chinese got in our way, I'll use it there too. I'm not kidding you, that was when he was going for total victory. So he goes back to the United States and he campaigns and he criticizes the president. And he says we need a total victory in North Korea, and if the damn Chinese get in the way, we'll take care of them too, and if we have to use the atomic bomb, we'll do it. That was Truman's push, okay? He continued this crusade across America and criticized President Truman for not following his advice. He finally crossed the line with the president when he tried to appeal his cause to Congress without the president's authority. He was going to go to Congress up over the head of the President of the United States for his cause. And obviously Truman got word of that because he had loyal members of Congress that said, "Hey, Mr. President, you know what General MacArthur has got planned here? He's going to want to address Congress about this. Do you know anything about it?" Well, he didn't, and it ticked him off. So at that point, Truman couldn't take any more. That was the end. So on April 11th of 1951, President Truman relieved General Douglas MacArthur of his command. In essence, he fired the popular general. April 11th, 1951, President Truman fired and relieved very popular General Douglas MacArthur of his command. Now, he justified his actions by basically stating that no general, no matter how popular, could trump decisions made by the President of the United States. No pun intended. Okay, and that's what he said. He said Truman justified his actions by stating that no general, no matter how popular, could be allowed to trump decisions made by the President of the United States. You know what trump decisions means? It doesn't even go Donald Trump. It's like if, hearts are trump and you're playing cards, certain card games. If she puts down a spade, no matter if it's even an ace, I put down a 9 of hearts, and hearts is trump, I get a trump per card. Well, President Truman didn't think you should be trumping his decisions, and that's what he justified. He basically stated about when asked about why he fired General MacArthur, he said, quote, "I could do nothing else and still be president." I could do nothing else and still be president. You cannot let someone circumvent the authority of the President of the United States. Okay? So Truman, after firing MacArthur, replaced him with General Matthew B. Ridgway. So MacArthur was replaced in the Korean conflict with General Matthew B. Ridgway. Well, you can imagine the dismissal of General Macarthur and the unhappiness in America concerning our gain of progress, then loss of progress, and the mess in the Korean War. It really destroyed President Truman's administration. And it paved the way for the Republicans to win, which we'll talk about, the election of 1952. And in this election, former General and war hero Dwight D. Eisenhower is going to be elected President of the United States, and it'll be his responsibility to end the conflict in Korea. So I'm not going to tell you how the Korean conflict ended yet, because it didn't end until Eisenhower was president. So Truman's going to leave office, choosing not to run for re-election because of the unpopularity of this decision and other things. And he is going to just have to wait until the Korean War ends in another administration. So he leaves office without it. Okay, what we're going to do then, kiddos, is we're going to have a review on Monday, and we're going to have a test on Tuesday, and the test is going to be, the majority of the test is going to be multiple choice. Okay, so just prepare yourself. Multiple choice. Now, I can do a couple of things if you want. I do have the next AP things, but I kind of wanted to wait on those till we got back. If you want to watch a little bit of a biography on Harry Truman, I think you'd like it, so we'll do that. We're making great progress, I'm telling you. I'm thrilled to death. Yeah, much love.